Teorita, the goddess of swords. As the 13th goddess, Teorita is an existence hidden for a very long time, for reasons beyond her control. She has the power to summon any kind of sword, from holy blades to cursed weapons, pulled from other worlds, or something that feels straight out of Unlimited Blade works. She's only one of many goddesses forced into humanity's war against the demon lords. Most of the time, Teorita carries herself with the pride expected of a usual goddess. But when she actually does a good job, she clearly wants head pats and praise more than anything else. To use her powers for mankind, Teorita had to make a pact with a knight. That knight was Xylo. He had to give up part of himself to prove the contract, then share an oath with her. This bond will stay until one of them dies, and only after that pact was made could a goddess fight for humanity. In this world, pacts were always made one-on-one between a goddess and a knight. There were only two ways to break them. Both sides had to agree to end the pact, or the goddess had to die. The best way to understand Teorita's power level is by looking into her eyes. Behind the flames, there's a cold shine like steel. Far away in the empty void, countless swords are waiting, prepared to appear the moment she calls them. When Teorita fought alongside Xylo, they shared something beyond words. It was a kind of mental picture, a shared sensation that let them understand each other's abilities and next move without speaking. This bond is what made goddesses humanity's greatest weapon, and sharing that power with a trained soldier who understood war was what made it truly unstoppable. Because of this bond, the power protecting Teorita's mind also helped protect Xylo's. Against threats like the voice of a demon lord, that connection was the only thing barely keeping him from losing his sanity. Generally, goddesses were like a second pair of eyes for their knights. They watched blind spots and gathered vision through a form of synesthesia, allowing information to process far faster than speech. While this was normal for holy knights, Teorita still often spoke her thoughts out loud. Definitely not one of those so-called useless goddesses. Teorita's most terrifying moment comes from when she summons her blades. The instant her power activates, the air splits apart with a sharp sound, and silver rain falls from the sky. Hundreds of swords crash down at once and tear through the fairies in seconds. As long as she has energy, Teorita can keep summoning blades without any limit. But things become more problematic when her limits were revealed. Like all goddesses, Teorita needed human praise to survive. Humans knew this and took advantage of it. And because of that, goddesses hated showing weakness and feared rejection more than anything else. The more Teorita pushed herself, the brighter the light in her eyes became, and sparks flew more violently from her hair. That was the only way to tell she was nearing exhaustion. As the goddess killer, Xylo understood this better than anyone. Goddesses lived for praise, but they were just as scared of criticism, especially when it came from their chosen knight. Rejection from that one person could shatter them completely. Early in the series, when Xylo had not fully accepted his role as her knight, Teorita felt that fear deep inside. Teorita was discovered by a group of adventurers in an ancient ruin in the north. Originally, Teorita was meant to form a pact with Cidia, the captain of the 13th Order of Holy Knights. The 13th Order's mission in Kuvanch Forest during episode 1 was not just to protect her. They were there to deliver her so she could be dissected. The military planned to study her body without permanently putting her to sleep, which meant she would stay awake the whole time. After learning that goddesses could fall for good, the military started to wonder if they could be created instead. Keep that in mind, because this decision doesn't end with Teorita. The reason was simple. Teorita was believed to be inferior. Compared to the other 12 goddesses, who wielded powers like future sight, storms, warriors from other worlds, or war machines, Teorita could only summon swords. There was even another goddess with a far stronger version of the same ability, but more on her later. What they didn't know was that Teorita could summon what she called the Holy Sword. The Holy Sword was something she pulled from outside this world. After it was used, it turned into dust. However, its power was absolute. Nothing could survive a hit from it. In other words, it denies the existence of any enemy it touches. Contrary to its simple appearance, like the weapon of an ordinary frontline soldier, the Holy Sword possesses an absurd power. Teorita could only summon this sword for a single breath. During that short moment, Xylo had to defeat the enemy right away. Once that time passed, she could not summon it again until she regained her strength. Trying to keep it active longer, or summoning it while low on energy, was extremely dangerous for her. As expected, the stronger the sword Teorita summoned, the greater the strain on her. While the Holy Sword was the most extreme case, she could also summon other powerful blades that were less taxing, yet far stronger than her ordinary swords. The thing is, the existence of the Holy Sword is a double-edged sword for the Penal Hero Unit 9004. On one side, it made defeating demon lords much easier, and the military started to see Teorita as far more valuable. Her position improved, both as a goddess and as a member of the hero unit. But, on the other side, that same power made her a target for even more dangerous and unfair missions. Teorita also showed amazing precision. Even while Xylo carried her through the air, she could still hit flying fairies without missing. Her power did not spread over huge areas like the storm summoning goddess or the goddess who could release raw power itself. Instead, she made up for it with perfect accuracy. Her sense of space is so sharp that even Xylo will be forced to pat her head to praise her. With Xylo guiding her, Teorita also learns basic knife skills. Just enough to protect herself if a demon lord ever gets too close. But the real problem with Teorita wasn't just her power, it was her existence. From here on out, we'll be touching on full novel material, so anime-onlys, beware. Interestingly, this was how Cidia planned to fight alongside Teorita. As swords rained down from the sky and pierced the fairies around them, Cidia would charge forward in her full cavalry armor. She would act as a living shield, protecting the goddess while Teorita attacked. As the newest and 13th Goddess, Teorita disrupted beliefs that had stood for generations. This drew the attention of the temple's Orthodox faction and the dangerous group called Gwen Mosa, the same assassin order that raised Sav. Originally, Gwen Mosa was once part of the Orthodox faction within the temple. After their beliefs were officially labeled heresy, they went underground and ultimately re-emerged as an independent and revolutionary religious organization. At first, their doctrine sounded simple. They believed the goddesses were pure beings who protected the order of the world. That belief later twisted into something more extreme, as they insisted that goddesses should never be used for war and should only exist as sacred symbols. According to Cidia, Gwen Mosa had recently started pushing the idea that the number of goddesses could never change. This means they were openly denying Teorita's whole existence. To them, goddesses were perfect beings sent from the heavens. In their eyes, the idea of a new goddess was impossible. And so, Teorita was labeled a lie and something that needed to be erased. Gwen Mosa went as far as sending assassins to eliminate Teorita, viewing her as a violation of the world's divine order, a false goddess. Teorita understood this better than anyone. Because, as Sinurva's replacement, the goddess Xylo once served and later killed, she's painfully aware that Sinurva's story didn't end with her death, and she knows exactly what the military did next. Andavila, the goddess of blood. Andavila is the second goddess, and she is the one most heroes should thank for still having all their body parts after being resurrected. When heroes are wounded and need repairs, she is the goddess responsible for putting them back together. The clearest demonstration of Andavila's power is her ability to summon sprites. These sprites appear as reddish sparkling slime when gathered together. Originally, each sprite is a tiny living creature, so small it cannot be seen on its own. When combined, they can close wounds, soothe pain, heal injuries, and regenerate flesh. Xylo and the other heroes relied on these sprites many times. Even though Xylo was not fond of Andavila or her holy knights, her healing is an important part of every repair shop. Most heroes encountered Andavila at these repair shops. However, her appearance was very different from Teorita's. Andavila looked like a humanoid figure, wrapped entirely in white cloth and bandages, stitched together like a walking bundle of rags. The cloth covered her from head to toe, even her fingers. She spoke quickly, often in one breath, and no one, even Xylo, had ever seen what was beneath the bandages. Basically, it was unclear whether she was anything underneath at all. Now, you might be asking, why? You see, goddesses were weapons. Living weapons. According to history books, they first appeared during the Great Civilized Era, when the First War of Subjugation began. From that point on, whenever the demon blight rose again, the goddesses would awaken. Once their duty was done, they would return to sleep inside their coffins. As superweapons, some took bizarre forms incomprehensible to humans, while others did not. In fact, Dota said he saw goddesses who were like a humongous whale or a big hunk of iron. Furthermore, they were called goddesses for the sake of convenience. Not all of them had a female body. Despite her young girl-like form, Andavila's role was serious. Because of this, her knights were different from other orders. The Knights of the Second Order were medical technicians divided into squads of about 20, stationed at repair shops all across the Federated Kingdom. Xylo never got along with them though. Their attitude was exactly like that of ordinary doctors. They constantly told soldiers not to fight recklessly, not to drink too much, and to get enough sleep. To Xylo, this made no sense. A soldier could die tomorrow, so being careful and not enjoying booze is definitely not an option. After healing someone, Andavila would demand praise immediately. She would rush her patients and insist they thank her, not just for herself, but for the knights as well. From experience, Xylo knew there was no escaping this. The best option was to comply, unless he wanted to be trapped in an endless cycle of demands for gratitude. Truthfully, Andavila was likely the most overworked goddess of them all. She constantly moved from one repair shop to another, always following the most brutal battles. While others fought on the front lines, she dealt with the aftermath non-stop. In her own way, Andavila carried one of the harshest burdens among the goddesses. Shadow Goddess, Kel Flora. Kel Flora is the goddess of the 8th Order. As the goddess of shadows, her power allows her to summon shadow servants, making her one of the most all-around goddesses in the series. The clearest demonstration of Kel Flora's ability is the shadow servants themselves. They are semi-transparent humanoid beings from gathered shadows shaped into solid form. Each one can be about the size of a child. They can understand orders and follow them without complaint. With enough of them, even heavy objects can be carried easily. Because they are quick and have sufficient strength, these shadow soldiers can even be deployed as soldiers on the battlefield. As these shadows grow exhausted, they slowly become more transparent. Even then, they never protest. They simply continue working until they fade. Kel Flora's real strength comes from the flexibility of her miracles. Kel Flora can summon her shadows in many forms. They can be used for construction, scouting, battlefield support, or to recover the remains of fallen heroes with minimal risk to living personnel. One of her most important moments in the series happened during a mission to retake the second capital from a demon lord. Kel Flora offered Xylo a shadow servant shaped like a bird. Before doing so, she quietly asked what kind of bird he liked. Adif, the captain of the 8th Order, was basically trying to mess with Xylo, so he answers for him and says Falcon, knowing full well that Xylo was called the Thunder Falcon. Kel Flora held out her hands, palms down, as sparks rose into the air. Her shadow began to squirm like smoke, lifting off the ground and slowly taking shape. With 2 gentle motions of her finger, she gave form to a tiny shadow falcon, no larger than a palm. It had no eyes, but it did have a beak. Moments later, it silently flapped its wings and perched on Xylo's shoulder. This shadow falcon was a backup plan. If Xylo failed his infiltration, it would retrieve the sacred key, Kaer Vorke, and return it to Kel Flora. If necessary, it could also be used to attack a demon lord. Despite her usefulness, Kel Flora and her Holy Knight were not Xylo's favorite people to deal with. Specifically, the captain of the 8th Order, Adif, had a rotten personality hidden beneath his polite way of talking. His cynical gaze and Kel Flora's cold stares were enough to drain Xylo's confidence just by being around them. Kel Flora herself was a petite young girl with silver hair and a doll-like, expressionless face. Her tone was cold, but her personality did not fully match her speech. In fact, she was surprisingly childlike. With Adif, she seemed to fit perfectly. When she told him to apologize, he did it right away. Even though that was not like him at all, Adif spoke to her in a calm and gentle way, almost like an older family member. When Venetim once entered Adif's tent, he found it full of scattered junk, half-opened drawers, and clothes tossed everywhere. In the middle of it all, Kel Flora was focused on solving an old puzzle made of thick interlocking wire. Rather than playing with a toy, she had the face of someone in the middle of an intense battle. If you ignored her mature features and icy expression, she could easily be mistaken for a child. Even when Adif told her to go play at a cemetery with the goddess of poison, her eyes basically lit up with excitement. Interestingly, when Teorita was placed under surveillance as punishment, she visited Kel Flora almost every day. This broke an unwritten rule among holy knights that goddesses should avoid excessive contact with one another. Even so, the two would talk for a few minutes each time, and Teorita always returned with some kind of sweets. According to Teorita, she did most of the talking, since Kel Flora spoke very little. Xylo also remembered that Sinurva used to spend time with Kel Flora. It often looked like Sinurva was the only one speaking, but it was possible that they were communicating in ways he could not perceive. In fact, Kel Flora and Teorita even had a shared code when they talked. Because of her appearance, there were times when drunk randos mistook Kel Flora for something she was not and asked to spend time with her. According to Adif, this happened more than once. Each time, he twisted the offender's wrist and knocked them out before Kel Flora's innocent mind could even realize something was wrong. Buffroke. Known as the goddess of weather, Buffroke controls clouds and wind, shaping the condition of an entire area to support mankind. The clearest demonstration of Buffroke's value came during the march through the Tujantuga Hills. Heavy snow was falling, yet Xylo knew it would not bury them or stop their advance. Thanks to Buffroke, the snowfall was controlled so it barely reached their ankles. Horses could still move, and artillery units could still operate without being crippled by the terrain. Also known as the Goddess of Storms, Buffroke's power allows her to influence the weather within a set area. She could summon clouds and guide the wind, adjusting conditions just enough to keep armies moving. That said, her abilities had limits. Despite being called the Goddess of Weather, she could not call lightning down on enemies or make rain fall only on the enemy camp. Compared to other goddesses, her power did not look overwhelming on the battlefield. But things became clear when winter combat began. Even in deep snow, some fairies continued to attack. To counter this, Buffroke's power was used strategically. She would create localized zones free of snow around offensive positions, while directing strong winds toward approaching enemies. This slowed the fairies' advance and made it far easier for human forces to hold their ground. In this way, Buffroke proved to be the most suitable goddess for defending mankind during winter. While her control was limited in range and only temporary, it was enough to delay the demon blight and buy precious time. Even so, she could not suppress the weather forever. The strain would drain her strength far too quickly, and constant interference with the climate could seriously disrupt the surrounding environment. Her holy knight is Savet Fizbala, a former warrior priest. A rare prodigy, she was scouted by the Holy Knights and appointed captain of the Fourth Order. Nifflaine. Nifflaine is the goddess of the Sixth Order, and her knight is Lufin, the captain. Nifflaine's power is simple to describe, yet frightening in scale. Basically, she can summon power itself. Every goddess possessed the power to summon something from an unknown place to fight the demon blight. In simple terms, summoning was the core of what made a goddess a goddess. Temple scholars believed goddesses functioned like gateways. However, the nature of what they summoned differed for each one. Some summoned humans, others manifested natural forces like lightning or storms. There were even records of a goddess who could summon visions of the future. When the Holy Knight captains gathered in Galtuil's secret meeting room, Nifflaine never accompanied Lufin. Even if she wanted to enter, she was not allowed to. Goddesses were strictly prohibited from setting foot inside that room anyway. It was reserved only for secret meetings between Holy Knight captains. They followed an unwritten rule of never sharing information about their goddesses, even with one another. But Nifflaine honestly never cared too much. She openly complained about the rule, saying it made no sense. To her, goddesses were like sisters. She wanted to talk with them, spend time together, and make up for the memories she had lost during her long slumber. In her eyes, forbidding goddesses from meeting one another was simply ridiculous. To be honest, Lufin largely agreed with her. Keeping the goddess's abilities secret did nothing but weaken teamwork among the Holy Knights. Interestingly, Xylo considered asking for their help on several missions. Part of that was because of Nifflaine's overwhelming ability to summon power. But another reason was much simpler. Xylo and Lufin were friends. Pelary, the goddess of poison. Pelary is the goddess of the Ninth Order. She has flowing black hair and eyes that burn like fire, but her presence feels nothing like Sinurva or Teorita. Usually, she looks gloomy and has a cheerless air at all times. The clearest demonstration of Pelmary's power is poison. The Ninth Order's goddess could summon any kind of poison directly from her fingertips. However, her power had limits. Covering a wide enough area to defeat a demon lord was extremely difficult, which meant her attacks often required careful traps and coordination. One of her most important battles came during the fight against Demon Blight number 15, Iblis. Iblis was infamous for its extreme regeneration and had survived countless attacks from the Holy Knights in the past. During that battle, Sov sniped Iblis from a long range while Pelmary's miracle struck it with a lethal dose of poison. The mission was considered a success at first. Iblis entered a state of suspended animation, and it appeared to be defeated. But the truth became clear later. Iblis recovered before its death could be confirmed. From that point on, the Knights concluded that the only way to eliminate it was to continuously poison it without stopping. For that purpose, Pelary prepared a special poison that behaved almost like a living creature. To fight alongside her, the Ninth Order wore creepy steel blue masks that completely covered their faces. These were anti-poison masks, designed to protect them from Pelmary's own attacks. They also used arrows tipped with poison, personally summoned by the goddess herself. While Pelmary's power was deadly, it was not limited to offense. She could summon many types of poison, including ones that numbed pain, induced sleep, or helped recovery. When used on Norgal, one of her poisons worked perfectly, leaving him sleeping as if he were dead. If Pelary was allowed to attack without restraint, she had the power to blast extremely strong enemies. But such an attack would almost certainly cause casualties among her own allies as well. Although her poison rain could even destroy a dragon, its effectiveness depended on the enemy. For instance, creatures covered in thick shells or made of pure bone could resist or ignore certain poisons. Pelary could summon liquid poisons, gaseous poisons, and many specialized types. One example was Red Number 10, also known as Sleewalk. In powdered form, it caused extreme pain when it came into contact with mucous membranes. Another was Black Number 2, where a void opened in the sky and a black rain of death poured down, coating a demon lord's exposed bones. There was also White Number 3, a corrosive poison that could be applied directly to weapons like swords. The Goddess of Weapons. The Goddess of Weapons serves the 10th Order of Holy Knights. Her personal knight is Kilba, the captain of the 10th Order. Like Teorita, Kilba's goddess could call weapons forth into the world. But the similarity ended there. The weapons she summoned were purely physical objects. They did not carry the absolute authority of the Holy Sword. However, she was not limited to swords alone. She could summon many kinds of weapons, adapting to different battlefields and situations as needed. Cidia, the Goddess of Prophecy. Cidia is the goddess of the 3rd Order of Holy Knights. Her miracle allows her to summon visions of the future, making her one of the most important goddesses in the series. Cidia appears as a young woman dressed in a flowing white robe. Her personal knight is Mavika, the captain of the 3rd Order. One of her most important contributions appeared during the battle against Demon Blight number 15, Iblis. Cidia received a vision and concluded that the only way to defeat Iblis was to continuously attack it using a massive amount of poison. But the real turning point came when that vision proved incomplete. It did not account for Teorita's holy sword, which later dealt massive damage to Iblis and finished it off. This gap revealed a major limitation in Cidia's power. Even for her, seeing the future was not simple. Futures involving goddesses were especially difficult to perceive, and long-term consequences were nearly impossible to predict. Because of that, Cidia could miss key outcomes entirely. This also explained Mavika's behavior during meetings between Holy Knight captains. She showed little interest in speculation or debate. Serving a goddess who could see the future meant there was no need to guess. When Mavika attended these meetings, her role was to keep discussions focused. If Cidia foresaw a future that required action, Mavika would simply relay the facts. In battle, Cidia was incredibly effective. Because goddesses and their knights could share vision through synesthesia, Cidia's foresight flowed directly into Mavika's movements, which allowed her to easily intercept the attacks of her opponents. Cidia's trust in Mavika came from something surprisingly small. She once spoke with her briefly in the inner garden of the Great Temple of Kivok. It was a short exchange, a fleeting moment, which alone was enough for Cidia to place her trust in Mavika and choose her as her knight. Sinurva. Sinurva was the goddess Xylo formed a pact with. She was also the goddess he cut down with his own hands. Because of that crime, Xylo was put on trial. It was the first trial in history held for the crime of sending a goddess to the afterlife. But while Xylo did slay Sinurva, he had no choice. Sinurva pushed herself so far beyond the limits that she exhausted all her power, risking her life because she truly thought she would be thanked by the unit she was supposed to protect. The real turning point came when Sinurva lost all her power. Once that happened, she became weak and defenseless. That allowed the demon blight to begin consuming her. Sinurva understood exactly what that meant, and she chose to accept it. If a goddess was fully consumed by the demon blight, there was a chance that a demon lord with the powers of a goddess could be born. To prevent that from happening, Xylo had to end her. Sinurva allowed him to do it. During the trial, Xylo no longer cared about the confessor or the accusations. His only concern was telling the truth for Sinurva's sake. He wanted everyone to know what she had sacrificed her life for. But let's focus on Sinurva for now. For Xylo's full story, check out this video where we explain every penal hero in detail. Sinurva was the goddess of fortresses. Her blessings allowed her to summon massive structures from other worlds. When she fights with Xylo, towers and walls would rise across the battlefield, and Xylo would leap from them using his flight seal, kicking off her summoned structures to fight in the air. Together, they waged aerial battles against the demon blight again and again. Like all goddesses, Sinurva's strength had always been connected to her mental state. And in Sinurva's case, it affected the strength of the structures she could summon. As stated by Xylo, Sinurva liked to act playfully at first. But when it came time to get serious, she always went all in. In fact, she usually pushed herself a little too far. Back then, Xylo could fight the way he did because Sinurva was always there. According to Xylo, Sinurva was cheerful and carefree, much like Teorita. Tragically, her death left a wound on him that never healed. Even after forming a pact with Teorita, Xylo sometimes saw Sinurva's face when he looked at her. He knew Teorita was not her replacement. But in the darkest moments, Xylo would find himself praying to someone. That someone was always Sinurva. In fact, Xylo could endure any insult aimed at him, but he would not tolerate anyone speaking ill of Sinurva. As he was sentenced to be a hero, Xylo swore to hunt down the people who had set him up, those responsible for the deaths of his knights, and those responsible for Sinurva's death. But even after her death, Sinurva was not allowed to rest. Before we continue, major spoilers ahead. What comes next reveals what happened to Sinurva after her death and dives into the truth behind the ancient goddesses. If you want to save this reveal for the anime, skip to the timestamp on screen. Otherwise, let's dive in. You see, the military began planning something that filled Xylo with disgust and rage. They intended to transplant Sinurva's remains into a compatible individual. Their goal was to create a saint. They claimed this saint would be the key to defeating demon lords and reclaiming human territory, mankind's guiding light. Yurisa Katafreni is the saint created from Sinurva's remains. She was originally an ordinary girl born and raised in a small farming village in the south. Because of a special stigma, she was chosen for Project Saint. As part of that plan, she had the right arm and right eye of the deceased goddess Sinurva transplanted into her body. When Teorita learned of this plan, her reaction was pure rage. She believed this was a cruel punishment aimed at her knight. Teorita made it clear she would not allow anyone to hurt Xylo or damage the memory of someone so important to him. By transferring Sinurva's right arm and right eye into a human, the military aimed to give one person both the ability to see doors and the key to open them. The girl chosen for this experiment possessed a unique stigma called Harmony. Harmony allowed Yurisa to infect others and make them part of herself. While all stigmata were rare in this world, this one was considered a rarity among rarities. After the operation, Yurisa wore an eye patch over her right eye and a long gauntlet over her right arm. Those were not decorations, as they're important to cover the transplanted remains of the goddess Sinurva. Before she was discovered by the Allied Administration Division, Yurisa lived a quiet life in her village. In fact, Yurisa's life before becoming a saint was filled with isolation. Because of her stigma, she was treated carefully and was basically cast out. From birth, she could share sensations with living things like insects and trees, and even with objects like rocks and iron. With focus, she could move them as if they were part of her own body. Out of fear, her parents warned her to never use this power. She was luckily allowed to remain in her village, but she could not interact freely with others. She studied alone, worked in the fields alone, and basically lived alone. The only kindness she received came from the village's priest, who told her that one day her sacred mark would be needed. He said it was a blessing, the same mark once held by the saint who led mankind to victory in the past. Yurisa believed that story and imagined herself one day helping others like that saint. That dream ended the night the demon blight arrived. Fairies slaughtered the villagers, the owners of the field she worked in was crushed, and her parents were blasted into pieces. Even the priest received a harsh fate. Yurisa hid inside the small temple and prayed that the demon blight would pass. And somehow, it did. When the Holy Knights rescued her the next morning, they discovered the trees themselves had moved to block the fairies. It was then they realized the true nature of her power. Harmony allowed Yurisa to impose her beliefs on people and objects. They also claimed she could harmonize with the remains of a goddess. After becoming a saint, Yurisa inherited part of Sinurva's power. Like the goddess of fortresses, she could summon structures such as castle walls, staircases, bridges, iron gates, and giant walls to limit enemy demon lords' movements. Additionally, Yurisa could use these structures for transportation. Yurisa herself did not fully understand the true power or limits of her abilities. Sinurva could do far more than just raise structures from the ground. She could summon massive fortresses, so strong that no demon lord could break through them. Yurisa has that same potential as well. However, Yurisa was only borrowing a small part of Sinurva's power. She did not understand how dangerous it truly was. Watching her fight made Xylo furious because he believed she was pushing that power until it would destroy her. Despite that, Yurisa held immense value as a symbol. Her existence boosted the morale of soldiers. At times, her body reacted on its own. Her right eye would move when it sensed Xylo. For instance, it would throb with pain when he was nearby, and her right arm would ache whenever she heard his name. The goddess of terror and the goddess of sorrow. Unfortunately, not all goddesses survived the wars against the demon blight. According to the surviving records, a few goddesses died during the Third War of Subjugation. That war had ended more than 400 years before the current era, and before the Fourth War. Many people no longer believed it was real. To most, the demon blight itself sounded like nothing more than a legend told by wandering storytellers. But the records tell a different story. Speculation points to two fallen goddesses in particular, the goddess of terror and the goddess of sorrow. Their remains were kept inside a rectangular box. It almost looked like a coffin, but it was far too small. If it truly was one, then it had been made for someone no larger than a child. Inside that box were the remains of the two goddesses, once enshrined in the castle of Zealand. The story surrounding them is disturbing. During the Third War of Subjugation, a saint was created through their sacrifice. Using the remains of the goddess of Terra and the goddess of sorrow, mankind gave birth to a special human. Basically, they managed to create a special human by attaching the arms and eyes of two goddesses. With this saint as their leader, humanity became a serious threat to the demon blight. That power shifted the balance of the war and eventually led to the reconciliation and peace between the two sides. The key to that victory was the remains of the two goddesses, which were later hidden away in the second capital of Zealand. But the real danger came from what this proved was possible. Those who supported Project Saint failed to understand the full consequences of what they had done. Goddess powers had always been regulated by the goddesses themselves. They had instincts that acted as a safety mechanism, preventing them from harming humans. But once those powers were placed into a human body, that restraint disappeared. And even if mankind could create a saint by using the remains of goddesses, then there was nothing stopping the demon lords from doing the same. And they, in fact, have stolen their corpses. Goddess of Beasts, Finland. Finland serves the 7th Order of Holy Knights. Her forces are used as a high-speed transport fleet under the command of Sigurja Partarakt, the captain of the 7th Order. The clearest impression of Finland is her form. Basically, she is a giant being that looks like a whale. When Dota just stole Teorita and doubted she was a real goddess, he mentioned seeing one from far away before. He described it as a giant whale-like creature. That goddess was Finland. Because of her association with beasts and transport, her power is used mainly on large-scale transport during wars. With her school of celestial fish, she acts as the backbone of logistics, allowing armies to move fast and smoothly across great distances. Interestingly, there is a back alley tavern in this world called the Yawning Pavilion of Finland. It is named after the goddess in a way that feels almost disrespectful. Infi. Infi is a very different kind of goddess. In the novel, she's described as a woman dressed in a priest's garb, with eyes that are almost completely closed. Her reactions are slow, and her presence feels quiet. Even when her knight praises her, she barely responds. Compared to Teorita, Infi feels almost empty of emotion. Her power, however, is anything but small. Infi is a goddess who can summon books. Not stories, but information itself. The clearest demonstration of Infi's ability is her power to turn memories into records and documents. When she activates her miracle, sparks dance at her fingertips, and a book materializes in her hand. Inside, it is information pulled directly from reality. All information about a person can be recorded. Infi's personal knight is Kafsin, the captain of the 12th Order of the Holy Knights. Together, they handle knowledge that no one else in the world can access. You cannot hide anything from Goddess Infi. She can summon a person's information in the form of a book. This even includes memories taken from corpses. Her records never lie, because every detail is kept exactly the way it was. This power plays a big role in supporting the first goddess. Infi can prepare records that supplement the first goddess's ability. However, there is also a serious limit to her power. If too many days pass after someone dies, or if there is no body, Infi can still pull the needed data, but the quality drops. According to Kafsin, Infi is extremely shy. He avoids bringing her into the city, believing it would be too dangerous. She is simply too important that protecting her takes priority over everything else. First Goddess. The First Goddess's abilities can't be explained without revealing one of the biggest mysteries in the series, what heroes truly are. If you want to save that reveal, I'd suggest stopping here and leaving a comment on what sentenced to be a hero content you want me to cover next. But if you're ready for the answer, let's continue. The First Goddess is the origin of heroes. Her power was the ability to summon brave warriors. At the very beginning of the First War of Subjugation, she summoned champions from other worlds to fight the demon blight. However, this isekai transfer method quickly proved inefficient. Some of those warriors could not communicate with the people of this world. Others had ways of thinking that could not be understood. In the worst cases, some of them even turned against mankind and became enemies. That was one of the main reasons she did not simply summon endless numbers of champions. If it had worked cleanly, the military would have built an entire army of isekai warriors. But reality made that impossible. So the policy changed. Instead of summoning people from other worlds, they decided to summon humans from their own world. That solved the problem of communication. And that was when they discovered something terrifying. As it turns out, the First Goddess could summon the dead. That is what heroes originally were. Champions resurrected after death. Over time, this system became what is now known as the penal hero system, for many different reasons. However, the goddess's summoning was never perfect. You see, humans possessed something like a soul, and each time a person was brought back to life, that something was worn away. With every resurrection, reproducing the same person became harder. Their memories blurred, and their personality degraded. That was why the First Goddess needed memories. She had to recall the heroes as accurately as possible. When those memories were incomplete, she had to compensate using her imagination. This is where Infi's role became essential. Infi could prepare records to support the first goddess's summoning. But even then, the quality of the resurrection depended entirely on the first goddess's memory and imagination. If the memories and personality become unstable, the revived person can end up acting like a completely different person. And there was another limit. The first goddess could only store information for 9 heroes at most. That was all her memory could hold. Because of this, she spent most of her existence repeating their information over and over, committing it to memory. To her, these heroes were humanity's greatest trump card. This explained what happened to Tatsuya. He died too many times. Or rather, he had been resurrected too many times. With each revival, he lost more of himself. Eventually, he lost his sense of self, his ability to think, and even his ability to speak. He could only groan in response to the world around him. In reality, a hero was not simply a strong warrior or the worst criminal in the world. In this universe, a hero had to be someone capable of harming their family, their friends, and those they love, all for the sake of justice. And all for a world made up of strangers they would never know. Before someone could become a hero, they had to die. Their information would be summoned by Infi. Then the first goddess would resurrect them as a hero. The first goddess was also responsible for summoning the heroes of legend. During the First War of Subjugation, she called forth the 9 Stars of Destiny to end the war against the demon Blight. According to the tales, those heroes included Vlad the Sealed, the bodiless Grand Sage and Founder, Avali the Cursed Sigil, Nij the Glutton, and Yukihito the Judge. Out of the 9 stars, 8 of their names were passed down constantly through history. But the name of the 9th star was lost. All that remained was the knowledge that he was a holy warrior summoned from a distant world long ago. He descended wielding a sword and a radiant beam of light. In the end, he transformed into a divine beast and fought the demon Blight. In that sense, the first goddess is the one who summoned Tatsuya as one of the legendary heroes into this world. To see Tatsuya's full story, click this video next. And that covers every goddess up to Volume 5 of the light novel, the latest English release. More goddesses will be revealed in later volumes, but without translations, we don't know much about them yet. At least for now.